Welcome everybody here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, today joined by somebody who I miss working with. Used to be on this very pod feed, is still at Silver Screen and Roll though, doing great work over there. Jacob Rude, have you like touched the ground since last night?
I said this elsewhere a couple times, but I didn't really like allow myself to believe that he was going to be a Laker, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and so like when they did draft him, it was just like a wave of excitement. I was in charge of writing the story about um
Whoever they
like
drafted.
yeah the Lakers whoever they took at 17, and I was like so excited that I was like I could see that I kept screwing things up and whatnot just because I wanted to celebrate, but I have to like put out the story. So that was a long way of saying no. I have not touched the ground yet.
It's This is one of the things that I kind of miss out on because of the school that I went to. I kind of have some of it with UCLA players, some of it, but I ain't go there. Cal State Fullerton hasn't produced much in terms of NBA talent, and the little that it did, like I've hated Bruce Bowen my whole life. Um, so, so
Very
I
relatable.
I can't quite like understand or you know sympathize or I can't share that sentiment that you're feeling. So I can't lie. I'm a little jealous there. All that said, what's going to make this conversation kind of awkward at times is I was hoping they would trade the pick. So
I was in a Discord call with a number of Lakers fans, and I was in the minority of people excited that the Lakers actually picked somebody. I was like, guys, just let me have some excitement here. You don't all have to be mad that they didn't trade it to Brooklyn or whatever.
um, I, you know what? I listened back to the last night's show that I did with Aaron, and we didn't spend, I don't think, nearly enough time talking about Jalen Hood, Schifino, or Maxwell Lewis for that matter. But the reason that we're talking here, you host Locked On Hoosiers.
Yep.
You are Indiana born and raised, and this is a guy that you've rooted for here last year and seem to have really enjoyed watching him play. And so I wanted to spend an episode here on this nice Friday afternoon by the time you guys are listening to this, talking about the player. And if it comes up, trading the pick or whatever, if it comes up, whatever. If not, perfectly fine with it. There's an entire offseason to talk about that as well. But I'm just going to read Bleacher Report's scouting report, and I want to see what you agree and disagree with, right?
Mhm.
They start by saying the pro comparison is Spencer Dinwiddie. How are things right now?
I could see it. I've seen that a couple times. It's not a bad comparison.
All right. Hood-Schifino intrigued scouts with 6'6" size for a lead ball handler, a dangerous pull-up game, and flashy passing. Low three-point volume and poor finishing are the main concerns.
I mean, that all as a kind of a simplified version checks out. I mean, everywhere from the inside the 3-point line to the rim, I think he's really good. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's more a lack of volume at the rim itself, and then the 3-point shot is going to kind of be the swing skill, the make or break skill. If he can develop that and become a consistent shooter, then he's going to be in the NBA a long time, going to be a starter for a long time. There's still ways he can impact the game, even if he doesn't. But that 3-point shot is going to kind of be the make or break, determining whether he's a quality starter or whatever his ceiling might be versus kind of just another guy that'll hang around in the league for a little bit.
I did watch some of his tape last night, and I was struck by like his shot looks clean.
Very.
It looks like the kind of thing that because it's not. Sometimes when you see guys who are really good at shooting in the mid range, they have way higher releases. The release is like way above their head, and the reason they do that, right, is to get a clean look when you're closer to defenders. But his release is actually a little closer down to his face, and that feels like the kind of thing that if he does decide or when he does start working on shooting a three pointer, that actually is kind of an advantage. Like you just got to get a little bit stronger and take more of those shots. That's a very sustainable, replicable shot that I believe he shot well from the free throw line
Yep.
at Indiana, and that's usually a pretty good signifier that a player is going to become or can become a good shooter. I'm actually fairly optimistic on that in that regard.
Yeah, I always look, as you said, to free throw shooting as kind of the indicator or an indicator of whether they can be a good 3-point shooter. But even more with Jalen is that the smooth is the word I always used to describe kind of his game, and his jumper is very smooth in the mid range. It looks good. It looks like a clean, nice jumper, and I think that makes it a lot easier to see a path in which he is a good 3-point shooter. Even, I mean, even his 3-point percentage last year is kind of deceiving, even at 33%, because um, he had like 3 games. I was trying to pull it up. He made 37 threes last year, and I think like something like 15 of them came in 3 games. So like 16 of them came in 3 games. So almost half his threes came in 3 games. Very, very streaky. And so like it's not like he just couldn't ever make threes. It was just it came in waves and came and went and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic that he can become a good 3-point shooter, but it's literally that word. He's gonna have to become that. That's gonna be an area he's gonna have to work on. But I still think there are a number of ways he can come in honestly from day one and impact the game and get playing time, even if that 3-pointer is going to be presumably a work in progress.
This is where he's pretty unique in that
Yes.
he is. You described him as smooth, but he gets after it defensively.
Oh yeah.
Like there are not very many players. Normally, when you're kind of smooth, that kind of transfers over to the defensive side of the ball, where you're not as aggressive on that side of it. But he will he will get into people. He will utilize his length. He is a longer, like they say, a longer lead guard. Mike Garcia, who does a lot of scouting stuff in Lakers Twitter, really likes bigger guys who have guard skills, and I think he's pretty over the moon about this pick too. But like the combination of being smooth on offense and also having that mentality on defense is really what intrigues me about him. Like I said, I don't know about keeping the pick or whatever on a team that was just in the Western Conference Finals, but getting somebody who can step in and help on defense right away, if you are going to hope that somebody steps in and helps on a team playing at that level or with those expectations, that's a great place to start.
And that's what I was kind of saying. There'll be ways he can get on the floor and be impactful. He's going to be a guy that can defend right away in the NBA. He has a 6'10", just over 6'10" wingspan. He's 6'4" without shoes, so like a +6 wingspan is huge, especially
Yeah.
for a guard.
Hmm.
And Mike Woodson's offense at Indiana last season, or excuse me, his defense at Indiana last season was he wanted a lot of ball pressure high up the court, and that played into what Jalen does best. He's a good point of attack defender. He has some work to do off the ball, and a lot of it was kind of focus and kind of those freshmen, those young player mistakes where you look away for a minute and somebody back cuts you or something like that. But on the ball, he's really good and can use that length. He even got in. I mean, he got into a bit of trouble at times trying to poke the ball away and being a little too aggressive with that length and getting into foul trouble. But I think that's a good problem to have versus the alternative. You can like scale a guy back. I feel like a lot easier than trying to turn up that aggressiveness. And he's going to be able to come in and be a good defender for this team. And for a team that at times lacked, the Lakers lacked defenders at the point of attack,
Yeah.
at least early on in the season. I think that's
And might
probably,
lose their best one this
yeah,
offseason.
yeah.
Will probably lose.
Dennis, yeah, he's that's a big hole to fill in, and Jalen won't be able to do everything Dennis can do, and there's obviously still a big gap there. But Jalen's going to be able to come in and defend, I think, well in the NBA really from the start.
I'm also like I was also struck in watching this guy. I'm not a college basketball guy. The only reason I ever watch college basketball is in March Madness when I have a bunch of money on the line and Avery is like waiting for donuts. Um, watching him last night, it really struck me. He's like a thick 6'4",
Mm-hmm. He's a
six
big
six
boy.
with shoes on or whatever. And, he's like, Kurt Rambis is going to be stoked. He's got a nice butt to him. He's got some thick, like trunk legs, again, I, this is the type of player that and now I do have a running theory here because the Lakers did draft for upside. This guy does like as far as in comparison to the other guys around that draft slot that were taken around him, he was one of the higher upside guys in that
Mm-hmm.
group. And that also kind of made me wonder because of some of the ambiguity as far as like the impact on this next the impact of the league that the CBA is going to have if teams were like really really reluctant to move actual picks but might be more inclined to take a player in that spot, that if you are going to draft and flip a player, that you take the high upside guy whose skill set transfers over and can impact winning right now for those teams that might have a player that you want to win right now with, or can build in the future with. So all that said though, like regarding what they do with him or whatever, the fact that like if I was just to say this offseason the kind of player who I wanted the Lakers to acquire, like a tertiary ball handler next to Austin and next to LeBron, who gets after it defensively on the perimeter, like that shooting guard, cool, hell
Yeah.
yeah, like that's the kind of so even while and I understand people have their concerns about drafting or having a rookie on a team that was just in the Western Conference Finals. I understand that notion, but if you just look at like the archetype of this player, he fits into exactly what the Lakers would have been hoping to add this offseason anyway.
And I think I wrote about it when I wrote about the pick. They are probably losing Dennis, and I think he can replace a lot of the things that Dennis brought to the table
Yeah.
with, probably more upside. I mean, Dennis was incredible. I don't want to undersell that, especially I thought
Dennis
later
is
on.
never going to be the shooter that this guy is.
But yeah, and so there are similarities there. That's kind of the comp I've been using, at least for Lakers fans, because they're probably more familiar with Dennis than Spencer Dinwiddie. So going back to what you said about how kind of big he is, he played at Montverde, which is a basketball power,
Yeah.
and not just like a basketball power, but a place where they're like training guys to go to the NBA. So he's been on diet plans, he's been on strength plans, he's been on. This wasn't like he came to IU and was like, "Oh, I'm really good at this. I guess I'll go to the NBA." Like this has been part of a plan for a while that he's going to make it to the NBA. So he came to IU because Mike Woodson is there, and Mike Woodson was just in the NBA for a couple decades.
Yeah.
So he this has been his plan. So he's been kind of preparing himself to be in the NBA. And I think there's a difference between a guy being big and a guy like knowing how to play big.
Functional
Like,
strength.
yeah, and Jalen knows how to use his size, whether it's his length, whether it's just the fact he's a strong dude, a filled out frame. I one of probably the best examples you'll see in tape of it is he can get guys in jail behind him on pick and rolls and keep them there. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not getting back around him when they fall behind him, and he's really good about he. When you say mid range game, I think most often you think about the jumper, but also like he has a really good floater
Yeah.
as well, and kind of that in between game. So he knows how to
And he's a good
run.
passer. So
Yeah,
like,
very
yeah,
much so. He knows how to run the pick and roll, and he knows like what defense he sees, what he needs to do, what shot he needs to get to, things like that. One thing you're not going to see a lot of, and it's going to be interesting to see, he's going to benefit a lot from the spacing in the NBA because IU last season had negative spacing. They had a lineup that would have been
it's a
awesome
Mike
in,
Woodson team. That makes sense.
yeah, they would have been awesome in 1999. I would say Mike
Or
Woodson.
93. Like,
Yeah, Mike Woodson is recruiting a different team. He was kind of stuck with the pieces of the last head coach who was really bad, but it had Trace Jackson Davis, who is a rolling big man that doesn't shoot from the perimeter. It had a
I was
power
hoping
forward.
I was hoping he wouldn't get drafted and the Lakers would slide in and
Oh
grab
yeah.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a brief moment where at 40 he was available and I was like, "Oh my god, are the Lakers are really about to do this?" Um
You would
I
have had it. You would have like I would have been recording this and you'd be on your ceiling.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I would have ascended straight to heaven. I wouldn't be recording this. Um the but you have a rolling big man in that. They had a power forward who couldn't shoot from the outside. He was just kind of the traditional power forward that played like in the mid post. They had a small forward who was like the only shooter on the team, and they had a shooting guard who was a slasher cutter that shot like two threes a game. And so there, when you watch tape, there's not going to be clips of him coming off a pick and roll and hitting a guy for a kick out three.
mhm.
That didn't happen at IU. So that's going to be something. It's going to be interesting to see how he kind of reacts, almost adapts to playing in as much space as he's going to have. And as I was saying earlier, he wasn't a great finisher last season, but also to the point of the personnel IU had, there were five guys in the lane at all times. So like he didn't get to the rim because the rim had like a ton of bodies around him. And he was a good finisher in transition, which makes me think there might be some more there than what he was able to show last season. But he's still going to have to like improve and be better in that regard
Yeah.
as a finisher at the rim. But I think he's
He's not
really
like a
also
very a vertical athlete. That's not
no,
the
no.
yeah.
And I think that plays into kind of the smooth aspect. Like he's not
Hmm.
an explosive athlete. But I do think he's going to benefit a lot from just having the spacing of an NBA offense and just having a bit more room to operate because he's been running pick and rolls for, I mean, that's what IU's offense was for the good chunk of the season that he was point guard. He started the season kind of as a shooting guard, and then IU's point guard got hurt, and they gave him the ball and just said, "You're our only point guard now. Go."
Hmm.
And that's when things kind of took off for him. So uh, he's run the pick and roll a lot. He's very familiar in that. That's going to be kind of his bread and butter early on, I would imagine, whether it's Anthony Davis or ex center that the Lakers sign in free agency, or I mean, I guess they could bring back Mo Bamba. I would be surprised, but
I doubt it.
yeah. So whoever it is, he's running the pick and roll with. I think that's going to be his bread and butter early on.
Yeah, I don't anticipate he's going to get a whole bunch of run with starters.
Yeah,
But like where he really intrigues me if he is on the roster is with second units where LeBron is actually the five and
yeah, that'd be fun.
LeBron gets to function in the short roll and he's a threat that defenses can't just like the one thing with Dennis that made his pick and rolls kind of frustrating to watch was that defenses could just go under the screen and he wasn't a real off the dribble threat, but Schifino is
Hmm.
from just kind of watching him and some of his shot diet. So I do want to, and now I'm going to try to make this work for the audio audience, but the video audience, I think are going to enjoy this. I'm going to play some highlights here if my computer doesn't stop freaking out. I'm going to play a highlight clip here, just a short one. We won't even watch the whole thing, but this is, I think, a pretty good example of some of what you're talking about, where you see like he's working in close quarters, but that physicality allows him to play through it, and then you see some of the finishing that he's kind of a tricky finisher, but we'll see what everybody thinks. This is him in transition. He goes off the left wing, gets into the paint, rim graze dunk, but still counts. Nice pass there in the pick and roll. You see what you're talking. He likes to have contact with whoever is guarding him. And that's there's your floater. Do you remember any of these games, Jacob? Like, do you
Oh
remember?
yeah, oh yeah. That Purdue game in specific, Zach Edey is a guy that played a ton of drop coverage, and he will punish teams if they play drop coverage against the Lakers. And
Yeah.
so that's where he's going to find a lot of success. He's in the pick and roll as well. You'll kind of see some clips, but he's a good passer, but not just as like making passes to a roll guy. He can make passes to guys in a number of situations like this. They come out and kind of hedge, and he's
Mm.
used to making passes to a short roller. I don't know if it'll be on here, but Trace short rolled a lot whenever they would come out hard on him. And he's used to making kind of the little pocket pass right there to the free throw line, which LeBron does that a bit as well when he kind of short rolls. And so it's not just he's a good passer in the pick and roll as like to a roll man or like throwing lobs. He's good at passing to in a number of situations, which I think is transferable. Yeah, that's
There you
one
go.
right there. And so that's going to be an area where he finds success. There's another really good skip pass. That's
With the
about one of
left.
the only times you're going to find him kicking out to a 3-point shooter. That's the one small forward we had that was a 3-point shooter last year. So he missed that. That's why that clip cut off. I knew what that clip was. That's why that clip ended there. But he's really good at just knowing when he gets into these ball screen situations, seeing what the defense is doing and knowing what the right decision is, what the right shot to take, what the right pass to make, whatever it is. And he's a high IQ player, and it shows in, I think, the pick and roll most in that he's never sped up. He knows where he needs to go or where the ball needs to be, and he might make a mistake and not be able to get the ball there, but it's never a matter of like, oh, he just didn't know what to do with the ball. Like
Yeah.
it's a matter of like execution, which you can fix. And so that's what I'm kind of most encouraged by. If he is running second units with LeBron as kind of a ball handler, I would imagine there'll be a lot of screen and roll, and he can make whatever the pass is, whether LeBron slips or whether LeBron pops or whether he
Mm-hmm.
short rolls or whatever that is. He's going to be able to make that pass to LeBron and put him into an advantageous position.
Yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of the things that he brings to the table here. I again, I understand and I share a lot of the sentiment about utilizing the number 17 pick and not
Mhm.
bringing in whether it was Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neal, or I know a lot of people were hoping maybe just maybe this would be the year that they got Miles Turner. Um, but I do think that if you are going to use a pick, or if you are going to use that pick in this spot, I know the Lakers really liked Kobe Buffkin. Like that was somebody that they were really hoping would slide one more spot down. Um, but all that said, like this guy fits into a need,
Yeah.
and he has the most upside of the guys that were drafted after him. So if you have the combination of a bunch of upside and he fills a need, like that's kind of a no brainer. And I kind of think on top of some of the practical difficulties that come with moving a pick, like Aaron talked about this yesterday on the show, and it was one of the things that I talked about in the actual draft is and wrote about and tweeted about leading up to the draft is teams normally are a lot more okay with like, okay, just send over the pick. We have a range of players that we might hope to be available at that area, and deals would get agreed to. But last night, with this new CBA coming in, and with teams just being a lot more conservative with their draft picks too, teams that would be receiving those picks wanted a much clearer idea of who was actually going to be available there, which meant that you had to pull off a trade in the 5 minute window
Yeah.
that you would be drafting in that spot. And you ask anybody who has ever worked in the league, anybody who has made any transaction, like in a fantasy league, you can't pull off a trade in 5 minutes. Like
Yeah.
it's like a week long thing with emails going back and forth and research on whatever. You can have some of the work done heading into those conversations, but it's really difficult. So I think for the Lakers, when you add the practical issues that arose last night, and then you add to it that this guy fills a need and has a whole bunch of pedigree, which is something we know Pelinka really values too, and upside. Yeah, the pick really does kind of explain itself.
I also think that to that point, I think there was really only one trade we saw last night that included a player. It was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like
That
draft
wasn't a
pick
salary
swapping.
dump.
Yeah, it was a lot of draft pick swapping. I think the only one off the top of my head I remember even included a player was the Mavericks, like you said, salary dumping. I'm
Bertans.
blanking. Yeah, Bertans. I was blanking on his name, but
And then they had Holmes salary dump to
well,
them.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it, and so there just wasn't the movement of like the archetype of type of deal that the Lakers were looking to do of trading back and getting a role player. I
Mm-hmm.
also think, I mean, Rob Pelinka spoke at um, the exit interviews and said, like, he was pretty clear he wanted to largely bring this core back. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, if your idea is to bring this core back, Dennis is going to price himself out of a return almost certainly. So, you
Yeah.
needed to replace him. This is a guard that kind of in that archetype replaces him. And then you can, largely run it back with what you
Yeah.
have for better or for worse. And even if you think they still need to make a move, they have expirings and Malik Beasley and whether or not Mobama comes back. And I mean, even down the line, you can trade Jalen Hood-Schifino still, and he's still going to have some value.
Yeah.
So this was a move I think that they made that doesn't preclude them from making any other types of trades. And Rob Pelinka kind of spoke about that afterwards, that they're still making moves to be a title contender. It's a series of moves, and it's not one move that they can make and like boom,
Yeah.
they're a championship contender. So I think they're, if you really think, as Rob Pelinka said, and as it seems to show, that they're largely going to run this back, then I think this pick makes even more sense as well.
Really quickly before we get you out of here, his fit with Reeves and I think interestingly his fit with Russell
Yep.
really intrigues me here.
He with I'll start with D'Lo. I mean, uh, both those guys being able, D'Lo and Reeves being able to play off the ball more helps a lot. D'Lo can be the spot up shooter to
Mm-hmm.
uh, Jalen being on the ball, and then on the other side, Jalen can be the point of attack defender that D'Lo is not. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I like that fit a lot. I I I would imagine if he's playing, Jalen's going to have the ball in his hand a fair amount. Like
Mm-hmm.
he has a ways to go with 3-point shooting, and I don't have the numbers, but I would imagine his spot up attempts were very few and far between last season, just because the ball was either in his hands or in Trace Jackson Davis's hands posting up.
Yeah.
And so there just weren't a lot of spot up attempts from three. So he's going to have to work on that. If they're drafting him, if they want him to succeed, I think the ball is going to be in his hands a fair amount. And I think even more if D'Lo's out there. With Reeves, it's interesting because both of them can be ball handlers. Both of them can play off the ball a little bit. Reeves more than Jalen, but I think both of them are strong defenders as well. I mean, again, Jalen was brought in to be kind of an off guard, and he did that at Montverde as well. So like there is some like success to that. And at IU, they were running sets with him running off of screens. They would run kind of floppy actions or dribble handoff actions, and instead of kind of in modern basketball, you do that out at the 3-point line. They just kind of moved everything in 3-4
Mm-hmm.
feet, and his shots were coming at the top of the key instead of the top of the 3-point line. So he has an ability to play off the ball. It's just going to be, I mean, ultimately that 3-pointer is going to determine how much he plays, I think, in general,
Yeah.
especially early on in his first season, because if he comes in and is able to consistently knock down shots and not even, I don't even think the percentage has to be crazy high, but I don't think he can be as streaky as he was last season. Like, he had games where he was like 6 of 7, I think, against Ohio State, or 6 of 8. And then he had games where he was, 0 of 5, or something like that.
Yeah.
If you can just level it out to 2 or 3 makes per game, then I think that would be huge for him. If he can do that when he comes in, I think he'll fit right in right away, because he does a lot of other things. Uh, if he doesn't, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle until he can become a kind of a knockdown 3-point shooter. So I'm intrigued. He's a guy that he's not going to be deterred either by a bad shooting performance. He wasn't
Yeah.
last
I was
season.
just going to ask, is he a willing shooter?
No,
You
yeah.
know, yeah.
He I What's the Kobe quote? You would rather go 1 of 15 instead of 0 of
Over
6, or
four.
yeah, 0 of 6. He would do that. He knows what his shots are. He knows what shots he needs to take, and there would be nights where he would struggle, but he never shied away from taking those shots, because he knew he needed to take that in order to keep a defense honest. So there would be nights where he would be, 12 of 17, and then I think his worst performance was again on the road against Maryland, where he went 1 of 14. But it was still the same mid-range shots. He wasn't forcing anything. He wasn't trying to shoot some hero 3-pointer. It was the same mid-range shots. They just weren't falling on that day. So I think that type of mentality will help him moving forward. Again, he's a smart player, a high IQ player. He knows what needs to be done, whether it's passing, shooting. He can read a defense well. It's just going to be a matter of kind of execution and whether he can do those things on a night to night basis.
Do you think he'll be able to get to the line better than he did? He only shot, I think, 2.5 free throws a game.
It's going to be interesting because, again, he didn't get to the line because he usually just stopped in the mid range and shot
Yeah.
a jumper. So
It's the
that
Suns
would be,
thing, right?
yeah, exactly. And so it would be a matter of if maybe with more spacing, he's more comfortable getting to the rim. But again, kind of to a Suns thing, those guys know that they are good mid-range shooters. So if they see an opening there, they'd rather try that than maybe try to force their way to the rim
Yeah.
where they're less comfortable. So I don't know that he's ever going to be a high volume free throw shooter. And if you're comparing him to Dennis, that's probably one of the bigger differences. Dennis grifted his way to so many free throws, and
Yeah.
that's not really part of Jalen's game. It could be, and again, if he's a high IQ player and
He's a
he,
physical guy.
yeah, and he might realize that, hey, more space, I can get to the line, I can get to the rim and draw some free throws. That could be part of his game, but it's not something he really showed at IU. Again, because he just never really got to the rim at IU.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, man, for hopping on. Congratulations again. Let me know if you do touch the floor in the next. I think the warning right is after 4 hours you gotta call a doctor.
What time is it? We might be on the clock here.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to him. Like I said, there's plenty of time to talk about whether or not they should have used the pick, and to be honest, it would have been a waste of having you on the show to have that conversation, because I do think, like, with where we are in basketball conversations, and I'm just as guilty of this as anybody. The focus a lot of times becomes more on the transaction than the action. And in this case, this is a really good basketball player that the Lakers just brought into their organization. I think he is a guy who can really help. And, he has a skill set that the Lakers really clearly need. He's a big physical guard. That's not something that they had on their roster last year. They had physicality up front, but they had almost no physicality with size on the perimeter, and that's something that this guy brings immediately before he gets into the NBA weight room. So I'm excited about it, man. Congratulations. Anything you want to plug before we get you out of here?
No, I'm excited. I to that point as well, I would say that there's so many moving pieces this offseason with the Lakers that this again doesn't really preclude them from anything. There's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of sign and trade possibilities or moves that they can make. There's a lot of movement that's still going to come with the roster. So I'm excited. Look, if there were just about any other player, I would have understood the argument for trading the pick, but I'm admittedly biased in this one. So I'm very excited to see him hopefully suiting up for the Lakers next season.
Yep. Thank you very much, man. You can check out his work at Silver Screen and Roll, and on Twitter at Jacob Rude. Right,
Yep.
is where we can find you there. Again, thanks again, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
As always.